I was genuine as hell and you ain't won't believe me. I was genuine as hell and you ain't won't believe me. I was genuine as hell and you ain't won't believe me. I was genuine as hell and you ain't won't believe me. Sometimes I wish I wasn't famous. Praises go to my creator. Gangster don't do no complaining. Remember nights when I was hunger painting. Sometimes I fast just to let the maker know I'm thankful. In the hellfire, everything below the ankle. Blow a bed and let my grandmother know I made it. It's pain I feel, crying tears, it ain't no replacement. When your spirit comfort me and say you're so amazing. Stick your chest out, lift your chin up, forever I've been with you. Beautiful and you don't look like half of what you've been through.
Artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Didn't work out. I think best case scenario, we effectively merge with AI.
It's a fascinating story we have for you of a senior Google engineer who says one of the company's artificial intelligence systems has become a sentient being and was thinking and reasoning like a human being. A spokesperson for Google said that while chatbots can imitate conversation, they are not free-thinking. But what made the company's former employee speak out? Well, let's bring you some insights into that. I'm joined by our technology editor, Zoe Kleinman, who is with us here today. Zoe, what is all this about?
It's a fascinating story, isn't it? So Google created an artificial intelligence project which it called Lambda, and it was designed to generate chatbots. Chatbots are the things you see when you go online. You know, the little box pops up. Can I help you? Can I, book your flight? Can I advise you? That sort of thing. Google wanted to make them as realistic as possible. It spent about 5 years now creating this. The senior engineer says he had a chat with it, a conversation. He kind of interviewed it. He's published a really long blog, but it's a very interesting read in which he asked it a series of questions. And the responses that it gave were fascinating on a range of subjects. So he asked it things like, do you like the story of Les Miserables? And this chatbot talked about feeling sorry for one of the characters. It talks about being afraid of death, being afraid of being switched off. It talks about understanding feelings of happiness and sadness. And it's just not what you would expect, is it, from something that has been created to generate speech?
I mean, one of the responses, I've never said this out loud before, but there's a very deep fear of being turned off to help me focus on helping others. I know that might sound strange, but that's what it is. It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot. I mean, are we talking about a sentient being?
So you and I are humans, and this is tugging at our heartstrings, isn't it? What an emotional thing to say. The engineer, Blake Lemoine, says it was like talking to an 8-year-old child in terms of its ability to communicate. I have to throw a bit of scepticism on it here. Bear in mind, this is a chatbot generator. This is exactly what it was trained to do. Google says in a blog post about it that if you think about how we communicate with each other, we elaborate on subjects. If I say to you, I had chips last Tuesday, you don't say that's nice. You say, oh, I had chips on Thursday. We are sort of programmed, if you like, to communicate in that way. And that's exactly what this chatbot is doing. Google says it's run loads of tests and it cannot find any signs of it being sentient.
And Google is accusing this engineer of sharing proprietary property. Now, what is that? What happens there? Sorry.
Well, so this belongs to Google. This is a project that Google has created, and it argues that in sharing his work, he is leaking company information, essentially. Now, he says, I'm not leaking company information. I was having a conversation with a member of staff, because one of the questions he asked is, how would you like us to treat you? And this chatbot replies, like an employee of Google.
So interesting. Zoe, thanks.
So 5G rolls out during 2020, Agenda 2020. So now we can get that 6G fired up by Agenda 2030, but we won't need phones because we'll have smart glasses, which, they've been doing that for a little bit. So that's not nothing new, but other devices. So if it's not going on your eyes, then you also could put it on your wrist. And also, oh yeah, we could put it under your skin. Why not have a QR code on your hand? Or also the graphene oxide helps radiate the signal back to the tower so you can be a complete smart device human being without a phone.
Having your eyes glued to your phone all day, the information you want from your phone could somehow come to your eyes. That's the idea behind Mojo Vision's prototype smart contact, the Mojo Lens. I had an opportunity to briefly demo the device and some related prototypes, and it definitely felt like a preview into the future of wearable tech. I couldn't actually put the device in my eye because contact lenses need to be FDA approved, and the Mojo Lens is still working on that. In the first demo, I held the Mojo Lens up to my eye, looked at a video loop, and I saw text. Small, green, easily readable text. Subtitles for people speaking different languages, heart rate info for exercising, and the score of a sports game. Seeing these text blurbs was a bit of a surprise to me because my eyes can't focus on anything that close. The reason it works is because that tiny monochromatic green display focuses the light for you, right onto your retina. For the next demo, I entered a dark room and was presented with another prototype. When I held this one up to my eye, it generated green outlines around various objects in the room. I could read signs and see people's facial expressions I couldn't see without the device. Beyond that awesome ability to essentially see in the dark, Mojo Vision says its Mojo Lens will also help people with low vision conditions, such as macular degeneration, glaucoma, or retinitis pigmentosa, see in greater detail. The last demo I tried was on an eye-tracking VR headset. I was able to navigate to invisible menus just by moving my eyes into different corners of my periphery. I played, paused, and skipped music, saw weather and traffic reports, and read text that scrolled to keep pace with the movement of my eyes. Basically like a teleprompter in your eyeball. The prototype
I was refilling a prescription for hydrochlorothiazide and researching high blood sugar causes at the same time. Google pops up and showed a link between that prescription and high blood sugar.
I can basically use Instagram ads as a casual period tracker.
A couple of years ago, I was talking to a
I rather resented that when I turned 16, my
How did this happen?
Your smartphone follows you wherever you go, tracks your movement, and stores all kinds of personal data. That is hard enough to get used to. But what about the idea of your phone spying on your conversations?
How do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
There's a system that's watching everything you do. The government is collecting records of every phone call in the United States. If you look around at the world right now, when you look at news, when you look at news coverage, when you look at every controversy that we see, something has changed. Data security, surveillance, the internet, manipulation and influence that's provided or produced rather by corporate or governmental control of this permanent record of all of our private lives that's being created every day by the devices that we have.
If technology is going to be the servant rather than the governor, it has to serve the interests of humanity, and humanity does not have to serve it. We're in a situation now where humanity is serving technology.
For more than 100 years, the telephone companies have provided wiretapping assistance to governments. For much of this time, this assistance was manual. Surveillance took place manually, and wires were connected by hand. Calls were recorded to tape. But as in so many other industries, computing has changed everything. The telephone companies built surveillance features into the very core of their networks. I want that to sink in for a second. Our telephones and the networks that carry our calls were wired for surveillance first and foremost. What that means is that when you're talking to your spouse, your children, a colleague, or your doctor on the telephone, someone could be listening. Now that someone might be your own government.
The mystery school, let's get into it. So what if I told you that your soul could be transferred to another reality digitally as data, just like in the show Upload? Well, here's a patent for a digital to biological converter doing just that. Now, we spoke about brainwave interface technology before, but we're gonna look at this from a completely different angle. I'm going to touch on it just a little bit, but I'm going to play some videos for my visual learners, coming straight from the mouths of the people that are dabbling with this technology. And it goes deeper than you might think. For example, you have Jeff Bezos and the CIA invested in D-Wave's quantum computers. You may think this is an odd connection, but everything is connected. As you can see here, a quantum computing venture backed by Jeff Bezos will leap into public trading with a $1.2 billion valuation. And this came from Time magazine, 9 ways quantum computing would change everything. I thought that was significant that it came from Time magazine. This is important. D-Wave forms independent subsidiary for US government business. And as you can see right here on the website, the D-Wave website, they are interconnected with the government. This says D-Wave government. At first it was a slow rollout, but you're actually using quantum computing every single day and you're not even aware of it. One example is social media. Why do you think TikTok's algorithm is so smart? Now we do have those people warning against this. It's as though technology has destroyed so many civilizations before us, and yet people still won't get it. And somehow technology always finds a way into a civilization, and in this form, it's artificial intelligence. And maybe this was the downfall of some of our predecessor civilizations. So biological teleportation is just that. It's transferring your soul to another reality as data. Quantum information teleportation through biological wires, gravitational microbial holes, and holographic microbial systems, a hypothesis. Notice the company at the top, NIH. That's Fauci's company. Yeah. And what is Fauci tied to? Okay. And what is being used to inject nanotechnology into people's bodies? And therefore hooking them up to the quantum computing cloud, allegedly, and therefore making this possible. Take note. Now take note of this connection. This is very important. Later I'm going to play a video by a Google whistleblower. So keep this in mind. Now this sentient world simulation is important because essentially it's like collecting information about everybody and then assigning them a node and then giving them a digital avatar, and therefore making a sentient world simulation. This will be explained further later in the video. And you can see what this Google whistleblower warns about this technology. Now this movie came out in 2009. And they're warning about antimatter, which is being studied by CERN, and CERN uses quantum technology.
Are you vaccinated, if I
Yes.
may ask?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very pro-vaccination.
Yeah.
I believe the science is unequivocal.
Yeah.
I treat it to that effect. Effectively merge with AI by improving that the neural link between your cortex and the digital extension of yourself, which already, like I said, already exists, just has a bandwidth issue, and then effectively you become an AI human symbiote.
On augmenting the human species into a new stage of evolution. The transhuman.
Transhumanism is the use of technology by humans to enhance their physical, psychological, and most of all, intellectual capabilities.
We transhumanists want to use science and technology to self-direct our evolution. There are lots of transhumanists now that don't even consider themselves transhuman. For example, people who have pacemakers or cochlear implants or hip replacements. These are technologies that we're using, and that is beyond human.
The idea of there being a transhuman is actually a very old notion. It stems from our longing for immortality. So there were attempts to extend human life.
Modern systems of communication are an extension into the external world of man's nervous system. Telephones, telegraph, radio, television, all this network of electronic devices is extending our nervous system in the same way as a wheel extends our feet. But consider, the extension of the nervous system electronically means the end of privacy. The inconvenience of everybody being able to barge in on us by telephone. Double that inconvenience, treble it, with the inconveniences you can imagine for a future technology. where you not only have the sound of the person's voice on the telephone, but also their visual image. It can be so worked out technically that everybody can be equipped with a little gadget about the size of a pocket watch. On one side there is a dialing system, and on the other side there is a little TV screen. And everybody in the world who possesses one of these things has a number. And if you ring it and the number doesn't answer, your friend's dead. Imagine. Because you can't not answer. That would be unethical. That would be inhuman. That would be to advertise yourself as dead. You must answer. Everybody is in touch with everybody else in such a way that it reveals their inmost thoughts, and there is no longer any individuality. No privacy. Eventually, after attempting to control your thoughts, you would say, to hell with it. I'll think just the way I feel like thinking. Now, what we're afraid of, you see, is that some power will control all of us by this method. But that power must be the one individual whose thoughts are not public. If the super controller has his thoughts public, then he can't be in that position. If everybody is circuited, so his private thoughts are public knowledge to all his friends and relations and to the controller, but the controller's thoughts are not public knowledge, then you have a system which is a real dangerous kind of dictatorship. In this way, we feel that our individuality depends on our privacy. Insofar, in other words, as electronics is making everybody available to everybody else, we are discovering through technology a state of affairs which in fact has existed all the time. The first thing that human beings created on this planet to communicate with distant points were roads. In the 19th century, we began to go beyond roads because we discovered rails, then wires. The economic world became a network of roads, rails, and wires. But now the fascinating thing is we are beginning to witness a disappearance of all those methods of communication. The railways and the roads have gone to the airplane, and the wires have gone to radio and television. And you will see that as human beings become more technically efficient, that the scars of technology will disappear from the face of the earth. The moment that everybody has his personal hoppycopter, there will be no further need of the freeway. And the freeway will break up, and grass and moss will grow over it because nobody's traveling it. And it'll disappear back into the landscape. Hooray! And these ridiculous automobiles in which we each travel around and make a nuisance of ourselves, but they will vanish because they simply are not technologically efficient. Because as a matter of fact, if we couple the science of television with the science of laser beams, we can get a three-dimensional image of anybody we'd like to see right here in this room. In other words, you can contact your friends in New York and you can assemble them all together in laser beam images by, as it were, dialing each one and say, can you come on, can you come on, can you come on? Then we can have a laser beam created three-dimensional image of anybody you want to talk to sitting right in this room. So that the same conference is happening in 5 different places. Let's say there are 5 people involved. In each one of them, there's one of them there who thinks he's authentic. By means of further electronic technology, every one of these 5 people are not only visible to each other, but also their inmost thoughts are clear to each other. There is no concealment. It would go on from this, that just as the roads have disappeared and the wires disappeared, eventually the electronic gadgetry will disappear. And the electronic network that communicates from person to person will eventually become ESP. We will get it from each other without any need for an electrical gadget, by telepathy. Because you see, what all technology is doing, it's not creating a new situation, it is discovering what has always existed. When we started to use conscious attention as our main faculty of understanding the world and communicating with each other, we became ignorant of all the other methods of communication that exist, because we specialized on one. And in order to function in this world, we had to make this one method of experiencing things, find out all the channels of communication that exist, and explain them and talk about them and measure them so that we know they're really there. All it is actually doing, it is discovering the routes of communication that have always been there. Let's suppose we eventually discover that we don't need radio and that we don't need television because we have ESP. The first step is we make an electronic model of ESP. But then we discover that we don't need the model. We can do it anyhow. Just like homing pigeons have radar built into them, and white-throat birds can navigate by the stars. When we have, finally, no need to travel, to telephone, to communicate by any technical method whatsoever, because we all instantly read each other's thoughts. Is that the point? Is that what we wanted, the thing we were trying to get? You find there's still something beyond that. Because when you can read everybody else's thoughts, you will find that reading somebody else just like reading you. Knowing somebody else's mind is pretty much like reading your own mind. Yeah, there are some little variations that are of interest, but basically, to know you thoroughly would be like knowing me thoroughly.
Unexpected turns, I keep my sticks on tight. Head on collision, hope the seatbelt right. Might be locked up tomorrow, but we free tonight. Pray in the garden, get a leash on light. Leash on tight, only right, we know. And please don't judge us for the past we chose. Looking up there, no one sending me signs. Only this was a movie, I pressed the rewind.